All right. So now we got this beautiful meme that after our first half of our lecture, you guys should all understand that face, right? You do not ever want to push that env file to GitHub. It will be found out and your stuff will be exploited. I've only done it a few hundred times, so don't do it. It's a pain in the neck. All right. So where we left off, we did our third-party calls to go through the back end well, we talked about the third-party calls going through the back end because we wanted the security and the authentication, the business logic, all to live back there. Also, one big thing I did not mention earlier. Cores. Cross-origin issues tend to be on the front end. When you're on the front end, it requires a lot of these things require the same origin. And you can't do things cross origin, meaning when you talk to another website, you have to go set some headers and set some configurations to make that work. I mean, some of the APIs won't even work with that. So just keep that in mind when you're working on those front end ones, that you do need to make sure you're not going to have any cores issues involved. Yeah, so keep that in mind. But we did just go over requests, OAuth. We talked about the env file, loading the env file to keep all of our secrets nice and safe, and using the git ignore to keep things out of Git, like our .env file. All right. And once again, we use the load.env instead of what was in the curriculum, because what was in the curriculum, once you go into production, you're going to have to rewrite that because you won't have a .env file in production. All your stuff will be in the environment. And the way that one was written in the class, it was literally reading the .env file, turning into a dictionary, and then using that dictionary to get the keys out, which is just not a great practice, because you're not going to be able to do that in production. So we switched it to the load.env that will read them that will read the .env file, but it will also read the environment. So essentially, it takes your .env file, loads it into the environment, and then reads from the environment. So that's how that works. So it is mocking up much more what you will see in the production environment. All right. So we were working on this noun project, and we had got kind of here where we were just doing an API call, picking out that one icon, and we were seeing that response. And what we were seeing is that this was really ugly inside of here to read this response and understand what was going on, right? Because if I'm going to work with this response, I need to be able to read it. I need to be able to see what's going on. I need to understand what it's doing. So what we're going to talk about now is just a nice way to print large nested dictionaries like this using something called Pretty Print. Okay. Pretty Print is built into Python. You don't need to do anything to go get it, except import it. So we will say import pp print, which stands for Pretty Print or Pretty Printer. Does it say, does it? Just calls it Pretty Printing. All right. And what we'll do is at the top of this file, this is not inside of our class. This is just loose Python code that we'll be writing here. We're going to create a pretty printer. I'm going to say pp is equal to pp print dot pretty printer. And then we'll pass it some information. The first thing we'll send, and these are optional, but we're sending an indent of 2. This is saying it's going to spread it out, kind of spread this dictionary out, make it so we can read it, right? So we're going to say the indent is going to be 2. So 2 spaces to indent every new line, so we can get that nested structure. And that just keeps it tight and makes it a little bit easier. Obviously, if you're having a hard time seeing the differences, you can make that bigger. But the idea of 2 is it's big enough to see, but not too big that it takes up too much space. And then we'll use depth of 2 here. That's a pretty arbitrary choice. The idea of the depth is how many of the nested structures are we going to display? And here we're just going to display a depth of 2. So we're only going to go into 2 nested structures. And then what we'll end up doing is truncating the response and just kind of putting like a ... there. So we can look at it later if we want to. But we just don't see it printing out and we can kind of avoid looking at it. We picked a depth of 2 mainly because the information we need lives at a depth of 2, and that's why I picked depth of 2. All right, so you can change that as you see fit. Does that make sense how what this is going to do? All right, so let's see here how to use it. It's pretty easy to use now. So here where we're printing response.json, I'm going to take that off and we'll turn this into pp.print. And that's all we got to do. Sorry, pp.pprint. pp.prettyprint. All right, and that will give us our printer that will follow these rules that we set for it up here. Once I come over here and I rerun this query, hopefully we will see the output printing down here. Obviously I've been having trouble with this today. I don't know why. Come on, buddy. Send it again. I mean, is it just gave me the 200, but we're not seeing anything print out of there. Am I hitting the right server? 8,000. Yes. And I'm seeing it hit. Right? There's the another 200 right there, right? 1609 right now. Yep. That's super annoying. Well, it should make it look prettier. We're not getting the printing to come out for some reason. I've been noticing this issue with Django where sometimes it just doesn't want to print to the terminal when you tell it to. I'm gonna restart this and just hope maybe that helps. I don't really expect that to help, but I don't know what else to do. To try to get this to print to show you, I might just have to go make a contrived example real quick. Hit that now project. Let's hit it. Got 200s and it did nothing. I hate you. All right. I hate you. All right, well, let's just try to make a little example here. I'm gonna head on over to the noun project and find oh, I don't have my keys in there anymore. Actually, I was doing this one. Let's do the one we actually did. So this is the one we were actually trying to do. So we'll just try to print this out. We'll hit try it out. All right, so we got this. So this is the big old dictionary we're trying to see, and we're trying to get it printed out nicely for us. Why is not showing up in the terminal? I'm baffled by because it worked fine earlier, and it did work partially. Sometimes it printed it out, and sometimes it didn't. But whatever. We'll come here and we will say response equals. We'll paste that in. Hopefully there's no JavaScript in there. Hopefully that just worked fine. All right. So we will now try to pretty print that. So I will build my pretty printer. Oops, I need to import it. Build my pretty printer, and then we will print it. So we'll use pp.print. I guess I can just type that myself. pp.pprint. And we are going to print, I think I call it response. I'm going to guess it says response. And there we go. All right, so now what we're seeing is we're only getting we're getting it into a nested here. And actually we did need to do it. Maybe we do want this on 3. Let's change that to a depth of 3. Let's rerun that again, and we're seeing a little bit more information now. And what you're saying is that depth is cutting off this stuff, right? Because this is past that depth that we had set. So I made it a little longer so we get a little bit further, but now we're not seeing anything inside of here, right? But that's all I was trying to show you. This is just a cool little tool to make it easier to print stuff and read your big old JSON files as they come to you. And then once you can see, we're truncated here. That was our max depth hit, so we didn't go into these. And we can come in here and see this. And all we're caring about, the only thing we care about in our project here is this index 0 object, because we're just going to look at the first one. And we're trying to pull out this right here, which is that thumbnail URL. And that would take us essentially to this icon, right? So that's all we're trying to pull out. And that's all really I was trying to show you. Any questions on how Pretty Printer works? And I'll change that to a depth of 3 just because that makes more sense. All right. All right, so now what we want to do, instead of just printing out our response.json, we want to actually return some information from this endpoint. And we are going to return that response.json into that icon, right? That was the first step we had to do is icon. Oh, I can look at it on here, probably easier, right? Wait, was I supposed to change the endpoint yet? Is that why it's coming off? Nope. And we're just trying to get into the icon and then get into the other guy. Boy, it's not easy to find on here, is it? It is so big. So icons and into the actual icon, thumbnail URL or icon URL, sorry. Oh, sorry, I'm doing a different one right now. So this is Fire. We're supposed to be looking at this one. This is why I'm confused. Icon and then into thumbnail URL. So, or icon URL. That's what we're doing first. Icon URL. So we'll change that here in a minute. But that's what we're going to do. So we're going to icon, and then we'll get into icon URL. All right. Once again, these assets expire within an hour. And if we refresh this, what you'll see is we have this URL. It takes us to this SVG, and it actually has an expiry time written in here. It has a signature to know who we are and all that kind of fun stuff, and some pair IDs. So has a lot of information here. Big point is it expires, right? It expires in, I think, an hour. So don't store them. This is a constraint. All APIs come with some sort of constraints that you're gonna have to design around. If we were gonna use this really further in application, we'd have to design around that 1 hour expiry. Okay, perfect. So we got that going. Now we're going to change everything up a little bit. So now the idea is we want to use these icons to give an icon to our Pokemon that represents the Pokemon's type. So to do that, I want to go to my Pokemon app and I have a place to save the icon. So I'm going to head over to my Pokemon over here. And we are going to, what are we going to do? Oh, we already have the type field, right? We're already holding the type, so we don't need to worry about that. So we're going to use this Pokemon type to bring in an icon. All right, so what we want to do, because we're going to get particular about this, now this kind of flies in the face of the validators we wrote earlier, but we're going to come in here to our validator, and we're going to make a validate types, because we're going to make sure our types are going to work properly. So inside of our validators, let's build a new validation to validate our Pokemon types, just to make this a little bit of cleaner integration here. So we'll call it def validate type. This is going to take in a value, which is going to be a string. And we're going to have a list of allowed types. And I'm going to copy this from my work because I don't want to sit here and write these all out. It took forever. All right, so where is that? Validate. Perfect. Copying him in. And I got my allowed types. All right, so we have this. These are all the types that are allowed on Pokemon: rock, normal, bug, ghost, blah, blah, blah. All right. Keep in mind, our database stores all of our types as uppercase, as title case. We have them all lowercase here. And to be quite honest with you guys, it is not a smart idea to store things in uppercase or title case in your database. It's much smarter to store things lowercase when you can, and then transition them when you go to display them to the user, right? Makes it a lot, put things in lowercase, a lot easier to catch conflicts. So we got our allowed types. And what we're going to do here is with our validations, we're going to check to make sure whatever value they put for the type is going to be one of those allowed types. So once again, we have to use value.lower because in our database and what our validation schema says, it has to be title case for value for this value. So we're going to make sure it's lowercase to compare it against our allowed types. So if it's not in allowed types, we are going to raise a validation error. Right, and we will just say invalid type. We'll just put the value in here. The other way you can do it, so this is maybe a different way to do it. This is the cheap way to do it. I'm showing you down here. Please choose from, and we will go ahead and give them a joined list of all of our, is that a comma? Comma, there we go. Of all the allowed types. So we'll just join them all with a comma, and we will let them know, hey, pick from these. Then we'll go ahead and use our new validate type validator inside of our model. So I don't have it open anymore. Import him in. And we will just use validate type onto the Pokemon type. So now all of our types are going to be sure to be validated. Now, once again, these validators only affect the database level, or sorry, only affect the server level, but it does make a migration. So just so we don't have to have any missed migrations lying around, we will do our make migrations here. And you'll see it makes a migrations file. Oops. Oh, I'm not inside of my container. Let's try that again. You'll see it will make a migrations file, and it is kind of a silly file because all it's doing is, oh, it's API app. Pokemon app. Pokemon app. All it's doing is changing this and adding this validator to this validator field. So when we actually go run this migration step and we do the migrate, it's literally doing nothing other than marking it as migrated. This does not write any SQL code at all. But it does count as a migration. So we'll go ahead and apply it. All right. All right, so now let's go ahead and set this up. So what we're going to want is that our noun project URL doesn't go on the slash anymore. We want it to be, I'll get there. We want it to go to, like, well, I want to be able to go to our URL and type in the Pokemon's type and then get back the icon. So what we'll do here is we'll put in a str and we'll put types. So now we have to add that extra parameter to the URL to get to our view. So now in our views, we're going to need to accept that type.
Have to add that forward slash after types in the URLs.
Man, good catch. Good catch. You've seen me screw that up enough times so far that you've learned. I love it. Again, that goes against the way I'm used to doing things. All right. I'm just going to go ahead and do it. All right, so we're in here. So let's go ahead and bring in our type. So we'll say types. Y'all got to quit chatting. Y'all blowing me up over here, man. I keep hearing y'all pinging, and it brings my phone, brings my whole house, and beeping everywhere. um, Getting distracted. All right, let me get back on track here. So we've added our types to our view here. And so let's go ahead and use it. So now we're going to switch our endpoint, right? We're going to use that other endpoint where we could actually search from, right? So that was this one down here, the slash v2 slash icon, where we use this query parameter equals fire, right? So we could just go ahead and do that instead. So we will come here. It will do a query parameter. We'll say query equals types. And then we're going to do a limit. We're going to limit to 1 because we only care about 1, right? I said we're just going to take the first one. So let's only ask for the first one. Then we're going to set the thumbnail size, which is a parameter that lets you set to 200. Which again, you'll see these here. They should see this here, limit. So the number of results, and thumbnail size is the size of the thumbnail. So we're picking their biggest thumbnail. 42, 84, or 200. All right. So now that changes our response. Our response looks different. I would go ahead and hit this and show you, but obviously it doesn't want to print for me. So I will just go ahead and tell you how it will look now. It's icons, right? If we look back at this one, we can see it. It's icon. Ugh, so bad. Look at this one. It's icons. And then we want the first one in the list. So to get the first thing. And what we're trying to grab is this thumbnail URL. So it's icons, index 0, thumbnail URL. So icons, position 0, icon URL, or thumbnail URL. We want thumbnail. Once again, they said in the documentation somewhere, I read it, it says to use the thumbnail. All right. There we go. So that is our API response. So let's go make sure it works. And I'm getting an error. It's saying, oh, it's saying that this doesn't exist, which it doesn't, right? There's no such thing as just slash anymore. So now I need to put in my search term so we can do like fire to test our fire Pokemon. And here we go. We got this. All right. So boy, I wasn't expecting it to give me the keyboard typer right off the bat. That is strange. Every time I've done this before, it gave me the fire logo and it made sense. Let me just double check that and make sure nothing's wrong with our API call here. Now project v2 icon. Well, let me take away this. I don't need that. That might have been our problem. Let me go run this again. Doesn't look like it. Still giving us the same one. Well, I guess that's what it's giving us. Let's do this query again over here on the API because I'm kind of curious what's going on. What's that right here? This is the first one it's showing me. When I do this, let's just do it again. Thumbnail URL it gives me is this one, which is that one. So why is it not giving me that one this time? I have no idea. Size 200. A little curious here. Okay. So it's definitely something different going on with our code that's not hitting it correctly.
Does the endpoint there need an F at the beginning?
Holy crud. Yes. Thank you. We were
Sweet.
using a formatted string here. We got to mark it as a formatted string. So it was searching bracket types bracket. And that's why we were getting that. Thank you, Patty. Gonna
Welcome.
lose my mind. All right. So now, hopefully, we get the right one. There we go. Now we're getting our fire. All right. And that explains why we got a keyboard, I guess. All right. 'Cause it was doing type, like typing. All right. Thank you. All right, perfect. So let's go ahead and just call a couple of these just to make sure it works. As I said, the normal one looks really stupid, but I can, we're not going to work around it. Where did our API go? Here we go. So fire, if we do normal, we'll get this one, which is once again that thermometer. If we do electric, we'll get this guy. That one looks pretty good, right? So I don't know. Where are some of the other ones? I forgot the other ones. Go look at our validators again. Steel or go. Let's try ghost. I bet you that one will give us some cool. Cool. So there's our icons. So as I said, it's not going to be perfect because we're not really being very particular about this, but that's the idea. We want to link these up with their Pokemon. So that was all we're trying to do. Have a way to link them with their Pokemon. All right. Anybody have any questions on this? So that's all we're doing with it. We weren't really going to put it on the Pokemon object itself. We were just going to allow it to send it through and then it would get the icon back for it. We're good? Got questions? All right. So now let's move to testing, right? So this is where the more interesting part of this lecture comes in, is how are we going to test this API? We know we have limits on the API usage, right? We don't want to waste all of our credits just doing tests, right? So what we're going to end up doing, oh, this is the wrong application. API tests. Here we go. What we're going to end up doing is building out a mock test provider. So it's going to fake doing the requests for us and get fake response back. And we're going to use that logic and hopefully to work the rest of our application, or the rest of what we need to do and make sure it all works like we wanted it to do. So I will show you how that looks. So we're going to do a class of noun project, test, and it's going to hear it from test case. Right? It's just like other tests. Just like our other tests, we had a def setup. So we'll go ahead and build out another def setup. Keep in mind, remember, it's in the camel, it's in the JavaScript casing. Yeah, camel case. I said it right to begin with. So it's in camel case, which is weird, but that's the way it is. We're going to set our client. We're going to use that API client that will do our API calls. So this comes from the test framework. I think it comes right here. Oh, no, that's not it. Oh, it's from the REST framework.test. That's what I was getting myself confused. REST framework.test, import API client. All right, so that is our API client. That is what's going to, pretend to be our little server or our little client user. And we will build out our tests using him. So we'll make our first test, call it 0, 1, and call it type icon API view. And this is the only test we're going to write. I said my first test. This is my first and only test. It's going to bring in self, and it's going to take in something called mock get. All right, I'm going to write a lot of this before I explain it all. Then I'll kind of walk through and explain a lot of this. So we're going to say something like types is equal to fire. We're going to set our preview URL. And this is just dummy data we're putting in here right now, guys. So example.com/img.png. So it's just the dummy URL representing the URL that we are now displaying to the user, right? That the graphic that we're getting, that icon URL. All right, so those are just 2 pieces of data that we're going to need to use for our testing. And now what we want to do is build out a mock response. And to build out a mock response, you need to build out a class. Okay, so we're going to build this class out using something called the, what do we call this? Did I write it down? I forgot yesterday too what to call this. Essentially a throwaway class. It's not necessarily an anonymous class because we do name it. But we do it with this type function. So remember we used type before and we could say, hey, is this a type? To give me the type of this object. And it would tell you, hey, this is a string or this is int, right? That's how we've used this before. But now there's actually 3 values you can go in here. One is the class name. Next is the can't remember what the next part is. Let's see. We're not using it. Oh, base class. That's right. The next part is the classes that this class would inherit from. Okay, so it's just like if you wrote class mock response. Okay, so this is what we're going to be doing. So we'll say this. This is the class name. We're going to make it mock response. And then this right here, we're leaving that empty. That would be, hey, what goes inside of here? What does this inherit from? Parents, right? Parents would go here. Parents would go here. I don't have a parent, so I don't need one. Okay. Now we have this. We're going to open this up a little bit, so now it's a little bit easier to handle. The next piece here is a dictionary put in. This dictionary is either a attribute and its value. So if like we had something like mock response x equals to 1 inside of our, let's say there's a def in it, right? Def level score in it. Blah, 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 right? So x is self.x equal to 1. We would come in here and we would write something like self.x colon 1 inside of it. Oh, sorry, inside of the dictionary I made below. We don't need to worry about any attributes. So what we're going to be worrying about is a function. So if you remember the request package, when we use this in our views, we use this response.json. And the JSON is what we're comparing. That's the only piece that we really cared about, the only functionality we really cared about. So what we're going to do is we're going to make our own .json method on our dummy class that represents what the data we're supposed to be getting back from this response.json. And we're not even going to give it all the data. We're only going to give the data that we're going to care about that actually comes from our endpoint. So we'll come over here and we will make a JSON method. Okay. So this is like saying def JSON. Okay. So we have our def JSON. Now to make this a function, we make it lambda because that's our anonymous functions. And then, well, if we have this in as an instance method, right, we would have to take in self. So we need to say lambda self. And then what does it return? Well, it's going to return icons. And then a list of icons with the thumbnail URL. And the value of that thumbnail URL is this preview URL we just built. Okay. So essentially that's saying return this. All right. So this is essentially what we just built out. Okay. So this and this are the same thing. I know that's extremely confusing probably to you guys. And it's hard for me to even write without screwing it up. But anybody have any questions on that? How this type and this are the same thing? All right, so that's the JSON. Lambda says make it a function. Self says this is the parameter, and then this will be what it actually returns. Okay, so we're just mocking up that JSON ability, the .json function, so we can test it. All right. See if I can format that a little cleaner somehow. That looks a little better. All right. So we're going to set this to our mock response. So we'll say mock response is equal to this type. So now when we call mock response.json, it's going to run this. And there's still more steps to do, but it will run and get this JSON as opposed to doing something else. All right. Once again, this your mock is only as good as the data you give it, right? So if I screw this up, everything's going to break, right? So we do have to be very careful that we got this right and it matches with what we're seeing from our API, right? What this noun project is actually giving me, right? So we were looking for icons. We were looking for a list. And what we were trying to grab out was the thumbnail URL. So that's what we provided it. We provided it with the structure in order to do that. And we just ignored everything we didn't care about because that was all we cared about. Okay. All right, so that is our mock response. So now what I'm going to tell you is I'm going to skip back up to the top here, and we're going to say @patch, and I'm going to pass it in requests.get. Okay, so remember, we use request.get right here, right? That's what's calling our endpoint. Okay. So what this is saying is for the duration of this method, anything that calls requests.get gets my fake stuff instead. Okay. You don't have to change anything. You don't have to import anything differently. You just got to say this stuff out here at the top, @patch request.get. And it is not linting properly. So what is my mistake here? Oh, I have to import patch, right? So patch will come from unit test.mock. All right. So there's us finally importing something from the base unit test module. All right, cool. While I'm up here, I'm also going to go ahead and import JSON because we'll need that later when we've used that before. All right, so this is overriding the .get request.get with what I'm telling it to do. And we're going to tell it right here on this line. So we'll say mock underscore get dot return value dot return value is equal to our mock response. So now the return value is an instance of this mock response class. All right. So that's the mock get that we brought in, right? So it's sending us in the mock getter, which is from our patch. It's sending that into us. We are now changing the return value to this. Now we can use it. So we will say our response is equal to self.client.get. And then we want to get from the noun project. So we'll use reverse. Reverse. I guess I didn't import it. I didn't import it yet. Potatoes.urls. We'll import reverse. And we will run that reverse once again on the noun project. But the noun project, if you remember, right, it takes in a type, right? We need to add the type as the parameter. And if you remember, before we were doing something like args of 1 to pass the ID of our Pokemon through. But this time, what we want to do is pass in a type. And I have the type up here called fire. So we're going to pass in types. Okay. So now we are using this mock client to go ahead and build out. So this is the client, right? This is the API client running. We're doing the .get, and we're doing it to here. But the return value of this request.get is going to be this from our mock response because we overrode its .json. So when it tries to call .json, it's going to call this instead. If you try to do other stuff with it, it would just probably break. But that's all we're using it for, so it should be good to go. So that's it. So now we just need to test this and make sure that that response is what we thought it was. So we'll do with subtest like we did earlier in the lectures. And we'll say, look, self.assert true, or sorry, assert equal. And we're going to check that status code. Okay, so we'll check, hey, there's the response.status code, 200. It needs to be, right? So hopefully that is the case. And then our regular test is we're going to do assert equal. And we need to make sure that the response and our preview URL are the same. Okay. So this is the preview URL. We need to make sure that's what's coming out of our response. Remember, that's all this is sending, right? It is just sending that preview URL, nothing else. So all we need to do is say, is this going to be equal to this? And it darn well should be, right? It darn well should be. So assert equal JSON.loads, because we have to get that response.content into a Pythonic form. And we will compare it against the preview URL. Right? And that's it. That is our test. So let me talk about that again from the top, because I know this is kind of probably the hardest thing you've seen all day, right? Probably the hardest thing you've seen in a couple days. So first part right here, at patch requests.get. So what that does is anything that calls request.get, while we're for the duration of this test, we'll get this fake stuff instead. We'll get my fake request.get instead. And that's what we were building out with this mock get. Okay. So that sends in the mock get. We go ahead and edit the mock get by editing its return value and making it this mock response class that we built out. And if you really wanted to build a whole class out in here, I guess you could. Just would be really, I don't know, messy and weird. So this was a mock response is the name of the class. This here is telling us what is this class inheriting from. And then this is just essentially our method of JSON saying it's a function and it takes in self. So it's an instance method and then it returns this. And that is the line of the code that we expect to get back from our database call. And the idea here is that there could be steps in between these calls and us actually doing this thing that broke our code, right? This isn't testing, hey, is the API connection set up correctly? We're not testing that. We're testing is everything after the API sends us data, does that work correctly? Does when they send us data, do we pull it out and send it back to the user properly? Okay. That's what we're testing. We're not testing, hey, did we connect to the noun project? Did we hit that API? Did it accept our API keys? Right? We're not really we're not testing that. We're testing whether the steps that we are taking after we make that API call are working properly. Okay, does that distinction make sense to everybody? All right. So let's go ahead and run our test. We get into our Django container. Manage, just take my hands off the keyboard while I write that. All right, manage.py tests. And well, actually, I only want to run the API test because I don't want to run all those other Pokemon ones. So let's do test API app. And we get a pass. Awesome. So just to make this maybe make a little more sense, the idea is, hey, look, did I screw up writing the code from here to here, from this step to this step, right? We didn't do anything with it, right? But, maybe I could have modified this or changed something. And, maybe I said a response, JSON, and we did icons. We just reassigned it to an empty dictionary. Like maybe somehow we made some sort of weird error like that, right? Now, I would expect, well, I thought that was going to fail. I guess I'm wrong. Nope, it didn't fail it. Well, shoot. Oh, icons. Maybe I'm doing the wrong thing. There we go. Yeah, I did the wrong thing. So it's icons. And you see now that it failed. So it's saying, hey, look, somewhere between you receiving that request and sending the response, you screwed up. And that's the part we're trying to test with these tests. Did I make that clear? I feel like that's kind of the harder part to understand here. All right. Guys, that's all I had for you. So once again, to recap, we talked about Pretty Print, how it makes it very nice to read your large nested dictionaries. We talked about our endpoints having shapes and the shapes changing, aka when we added the ID, or sorry, when we added the types to our URL endpoints and stuff like that, and changing all that stuff. And we mocked up third-party calls in our tests, which is the coolest part. So makes it offline and makes it fast, free, and deterministic, right? So those are kind of the reasons why we like to do the testing like this. Any questions? Did I thoroughly confuse everybody or did I thoroughly bore everybody? What's going on? One of the two. One of the two happened.
My
Maybe
brain's
it was a
just
little.
kind of processing everything.
All right.
Column A,
It's
column B.
just- I think it's just getting to the test. I mean, that's the for me, yeah, I'm just trying to work get to where I can actually get to needing to set up the tests. I think that's the thing.
That's the hard part. Then once you get there, you'll be lost on the test possibly, or maybe it'll make sense at that point.
Yeah, probably.
Gotcha. Yeah. So I mean, we didn't do a lot today, right? This is really all we wrote, right? We did add a validator, which was not really necessary, but we just did it because to do it. We added some URLs in, we made a project, and all we did was this one GET request, right? That's really all we did. And we added these things into the environment. Remember to do that, we went into our manage our settings inside of our Pokedex project. And we did this thing, right? That was when we installed the load.dot.env, and then we loaded it in from the file. And what's cool about load.dot.env, if this file does not exist, it just defaults to trying to go to the environment. So if it doesn't see this, it's going to check the environment. It will find it if it's in the environment. Once again, that's saving us a lot of steps and a lot of hassle when we go to deploy our application, because that's where all of our env variables should be living. We'll be setting them in our environment somewhere. All right, well, that's all I had. I will let